Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
I'm with Dr. Randeep Guleria, the director of India's premier medical institute, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and also an expert in respiratory diseases. Dr. Guleria, welcome to The Print.
Thank you.
So we are this is the 7th month of the COVID epidemic or pandemic. India is more or less open. The unlockdown has been in place now for some weeks. And I was just looking at some figures, and this week at least some of the figures look quite good. At least we have this sort of the lowest number of daily COVID cases, below 50,000 in the last 3 months, 46,000 something. The RT value, which is the reproductive value, has decreased from 0.93 to 0.87. The positivity rate has fallen also from 6.43 to 5.93. Now, some figures may change, of course, but what do you attribute this to? Do you think we have flattened the COVID curve?
So I think it's early days to say that we flattened the curve. We've seen this all over the world, that it's the pandemic has its ups and downs. And there are times for example, in Delhi, when we felt that we had flattened the curve only to see it go up again. And therefore we need to be cautious. So I would say we have cautious optimism. At the same time, we need not to lose sight of our goal. And that is to have a sustained fall in the number of cases at a national level. And to do that, I think we need to follow the principles of what we call non-pharmacological means, which the Honorable Prime Minister is also being emphasizing upon: physical distancing, masking or wearing a mask whenever we go out, and hand washing. Because we know from past experience that this virus is one which can spread very rapidly. It has the ability to spread very much, and they can be super spreading events, especially if we are not wearing masks and we all sort of crowd together. And that has a very high probability of happening during the festive season and during the winter months. So cautious optimism.
So we are in the middle of the festive season. I mean, Dussehra is around the corner. Diwali is a few weeks away. This is the Durga Puja, especially in Eastern India. So what advice would you give these people? You know, the Calcutta High Court, for example, has said that people cannot go inside the Durga Puja pandals. But do you think that's a bit severe, or is it that that's the right thing to do?
So I think we have to be very careful. And we know that we've reached a stage that we have what we're saying COVID appropriate behavior fatigue. For 6 months, people have actually been sort of inside, scared to go out, not being able to socialize, not being able to get their business back on track, not being able to do a lot of things which in the pre-COVID era we considered routine and didn't even think about twice.
Right.
Now we've reached a stage where there is a lot of frustration and feeling that enough is enough. And especially among the younger generation, who feel that, you know, they are likely to get only a mild infection and they may come out of it without realizing that they may carry the infection home and cause a serious problem to people with comorbidities or their parents or their grandparents.
Have you seen this in the hospital, doctor? Have you seen this at the at AIIMS and elsewhere?
Yes. So what we're seeing, and this is why I keep saying that we have to be careful. We've seen people who've got, for example, I'll give you an example of a person I know. His daughter went out with her friend for a weekend to Jaipur and came back and got infected. And then not only she, her parents, but both her father's parents and her mother's parents, who were staying together at that point in time, they all got infected, and they're in their 80s and 90s. So one person who can bring the infection home can actually give it to everyone, because they would mix together, they will meet each other. And we must understand that in almost 40% of people, especially the younger people, you may be asymptomatic. You may be infectious, but you may be asymptomatic. That's why I think that we still need to be very, very cautious. We have been very lucky that our case fatality has been low. We've not had that higher mortality has been reported, let's say, in Europe, and we need to work aggressively on keeping that figure as low as possible.
But you said earlier that this is that, in September we crossed perhaps one peak. But are you saying that more peaks could come again?
So if you look at past experience, and this is for many of the pandemics, including the 1918 pandemic,
The Spanish flu, yeah.
the Spanish flu, what actually happened was that the second peak was bigger than the first one. And that was actually related to the fact that people got just fed up of the restrictions that the government had sort of imposed at that point in time. And they started celebrating, having parties, having get-togethers. And obviously, they were not really aware of the whole situation as we are today. And this led to a huge spike in the number of cases and a very high mortality. We must learn from history. And I think that is why being very, very careful in making sure that we don't have a huge second spike is of paramount importance, because when we start having this COVID behavior fatigue, we are actually sort of promoting the spread of this infection, and it can spread like wildfire.
So are you worried that a second big spike is round the corner?
I'm worried that if we are not careful, we may have an increasing number of cases. And that is why I keep emphasizing that we must be able to have appropriate behavior, because until we have a vaccine, this is something that we need to do aggressively. Otherwise, we will have a huge strain on our health resources.
Doctor, the Department of Science and Technology in a recent study said that India had crossed its COVID peak in September, but also warned that, like you're warning right now, that if you display COVID fatigue and say कि अच्छा सब चलता है, सब ठीक हो जाएगा, then as soon as November, you could have a big spike, and that could result in a much larger number of deaths. 10 lakh active cases, this particular study is talking about. Today we have 7.5 lakh active cases. I mean, this seems quite, it's quite a fearful note of that it's injecting into the story.
So I think it's looking at what we call a worst case scenario,
right,
and giving that numbers, because there are two things. One is hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst. Mm-hmm. So we are hoping that people will understand the message that is being given from the highest level, from the Prime Minister by all the experts. But we're also preparing for what could be the worst case scenario in terms of requirement in our health care system, and making sure that we don't get caught off guard. And I think that is a sort of a sensible thing to do. Hopefully, we will not reach that number. I remember that when we had the spike in cases in June in Delhi, there was a huge prediction that we will run out of beds, and and we really set up field hospitals. We did a lot of work to bring that, not allow that to happen, and it worked. And we didn't have these huge cases that we were anticipating in Delhi, but we prepared for it. And I think we should also do the same thing, work aggressively, both in terms of making sure that that peak doesn't happen, and secondly, or it is blunted, and secondly, have resources available in the health infrastructure to manage any increase in number of cases if that happens.
But do you have these resources in the health infrastructure, or are you concerned that you may be falling short?
I think we've been able to do over the last 4 to 6 months is that we've been able to really make these resources available. And I think that is something that has been shown in terms of resilience as far as India is concerned. When we started off, and when the lockdown was there was this huge issue that we would run out of PPEs. Yeah. I remember that we ourselves were looking at recycling PPEs, and we did a whole research on how can we recycle PPEs. We were looking at shortage of ventilators and how we would have 2 or 3 patients sharing one ventilators. A whole study was done to see, can you have 2 patients being put on the same ventilator? Because this was what was done in Italy and in Spain. They ran out of ventilators. And therefore, we prepared for all of this. And I'm really happy to say that currently we are in a situation where we'd say that we are exporting PPEs. There's really no shortage. We have now adequate oxygen beds, and we have ventilators which are being made in our own country. So I think we are in a better position than what we were a few months ago. But we need to keep on preparing, because this pandemic is unpredictable, and therefore you must be ready for whatever it throws at you.
So did you share ventilators? Did your parents at AIIMS, did they share ventilators?
In India, this situation did not come that we had to share ventilators. We were lucky not only in our hospitals across the country, and I know many hospitals when we had the initial outbreak in Spain and Italy, and there was this protocols of sharing ventilators, try to see that if we had a situation, what protocol will we follow? But we've never had any shortage of ventilators. And that is another very interesting thing, that the mortality in our country has been low, and we've been able to manage most of our patients on high flow oxygen and what we call conscious proning. And the number of patients who have required ventilatory support has not been as large as it was in Spain and in Italy.
But doctor, several of these studies have also shown, and you get these varying figures. In fact, there's Department of Science and Technology, some officials and some doctors are saying off the record that for every case, every active case in India, there are about 60 or 65 cases that go undetected.
So the issue here is the number of cases that go undetected are those who are asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic and never get tested. And that is what also comes out from the serosurveillance study.
Right.
When we do a serosurveillance, we survey those individuals who are not having COVID, and we find that almost 20 to 30% of individuals who said they've never had COVID infection have antibodies against COVID, which suggests that we have a large number of our individuals who are young, who have mild COVID infection and recover without any treatment or without having visited a healthcare facility. And therefore, if we look at an infection mortality rate, then that's even going to be lower because these people are not counted in the case fatality rate. So if we really see how many people got infected with COVID, whether they got tested or not, and then see how many died, it will be much lower than what the current figures are. And we may actually, at the end of the day, when we analyze all our data, find that COVID did cause a much lower mortality in our country than we had thought of.
So going forward, just a few questions. I know, doctor, you're really busy, but again, the so-called the several drugs that have been used these past few months, remdesivir, HCQ, lopinavir, interferon. Now it seems that they've had no effect on COVID patients, and none other than the WHO Solidarity trial has revealed this.
So that's true, and I think we are still evolving. And I keep saying in a lot of my talks that the question that we have is when to give and what to give. That is the question. To give or not to give, and when to give and when not to give.
Right.
So I think most of these drugs may have some role, but it's when we give them. For example, we know that now steroids are useful, but we also know that steroids given early can be harmful. They should be given only when there is oxygen requirement. I personally feel that convalescent plasma, which we are saying is of no use, may be useful in the early stage when your own antibodies are not there.
Right.
But when your own antibodies have been formed, then giving antibodies from outside through convalescent plasma may not be useful.
Right.
Similarly, remdesivir would be useful when there is viral replication. It decreases viral replication. If the virus has already replicated and it is there in your body, then giving remdesivir may not be that useful. So I think it's also important to see the timing of the drugs that you give, and it's too early right now to write off many of these drugs. They may find a place in the treatment strategy, but as in a limited way, depending on the timing of the disease. There is no real magic bullet, if I may put it that way.
So one quick question on the plasma therapy, because you raised it as well. ICMR's study called PLACID, the acronym, which is PLACID, found that, like you said, plasma therapy had no real effect on reducing mortality. But now it seems that the trial did not look for the presence of neutralizing antibodies before transfusing blood plasma to patients. So obviously there was something wrong.
So the trial was done in a field situation, and in a field situation in India at that point in time, it was not possible to look in every hospital for neutralizing antibodies. And it also gave plasma to individuals who already had antibodies in their blood. So giving additional antibodies may not be of much use. So that's what I'm saying. The study did not show a utility of plasma in a field situation, but it was, one would have liked it to be done in a better manner in terms of trying to see that it did look at neutralizing antibodies, what was the antibody titer in the plasma and in the person who was getting the plasma. But that is difficult to do in a field situation. You can do it more in a controlled situation. And that's exactly the point that I was trying to make, that we need more data before we write off many of these medications or treatment strategies.
So, Doctor, here is a question that I think everybody wants an answer to. When are we getting a vaccine?
So that's a tough question, but what I'll try to say is if everything works out well, if we are able to get the safety data in and it shows that the vaccine is really safe, and if we get efficacious data to show that it's effective, then and there are no hiccups on the way, by early next year we should be able to get a vaccine.
But
I
what
think
does early next year mean? Is it January, February, March, April?
So that's there are two parts in this. One part is the vaccine being given a license, and the second part is the vaccine being manufactured in large amounts to be distributed to the general population. The license may come as early as the beginning, the first 2-3 months of the year, but manufacturing and all may take some more time. And therefore, that is the other big issue, that will we have so many doses available? How do we prioritize it? Will we need to have a lot of other things that are already being done in terms of the syringes, the needles, the training of the healthcare workers to give the vaccine? And remember, most of these vaccines have 2 doses, so you need to give another dose. So how do we give those 2 doses? Those are the strategies which are being worked at. And based on that, and once that is in place, the vaccine could be rolled out. And another thing that I would like to add is that it's not necessary that the vaccine which is out first is the best vaccine. It may not be the best vaccine in terms of efficacy, in terms of the immunity it gives, for the duration of immunity it gives. Right. So we need to continue to look at the vaccine as they come, and therefore the strategy of vaccination may evolve over the next year. The vaccine which is out first may not be the best vaccine, and we should continue to look at the vaccine as they come and see which is best for our country, which is more suitable, and which gives the maximum efficacy. So that's what I'm saying. The vaccine is evolving, and it's not that we will be able to say that the vaccine that comes out on day one finishes the story. The story will still continue.
But this platform, I mean, just give us some idea of your strategy. How are you going to leverage, and what is the platform that you're going to use?
So that is already being worked at in terms of vaccine. There are 3 parts in that you just that we looked at. One part is, of course, the manufacturing part. The other is to distribution and maintaining a cold chain. And the third is to have trained healthcare workers to give it to those who are being prioritized to get the vaccine. And that line listing, training of healthcare workers, that work is already on, and that is.
Are you telling me that that healthcare workers will need to be trained specially to give a COVID vaccine? I'm sure everybody sui to sabhi laga sakte hain. I mean, every doctor and every nurse knows how to.
So the protocol has to be followed. You have to have a consent. You have to explain the side effects which can happen to the vaccine, how it is to be given, if they have any side effects, what they should do. Remember, when we are giving this vaccine, it's also an ongoing monitoring to see for any side effects.
Right.
So it's not like giving just any tika and then saying ki, that's it. We should follow up these patients to make sure that this vaccine is safe in the field situation that it is being given. Sometimes there can be a local reaction at the site of the injection. You can have even some sort of fever or body aches. So you have to inform the person who's being vaccinated of the side effects which can happen because of the vaccine.
And digital health IDs, do Indians need to have a digital health ID to receive a vaccine? The COVID vaccine?
So I think that is something that the government has to decide. It's going to be a difficult situation, because if the vaccine comes early, everyone may not have a digital health platform. And we are trying to reach out to the rural India also, and in many parts of India that may not be practical to begin with. Therefore, I think that is something that we have to look at it. What is the best way to reach out to everyone in our country who needs the vaccine?
And it'll take some time anyway for 1.3 billion people, or even if you leave out children and minors, it should take at least about a year, would you say, for everybody to be vaccinated?
Yes. Minimum a year.
Right. So your golden last words, doctor, no magic bullet for the COVID coronavirus.
So there's no magic bullet as far as treatment is concerned, but there is a magic bullet to really prevent the spread of infection and decrease the number of cases. And that is basically the 3 pillars of masking, physical distancing, and hand washing. And there is data which shows that we can bring down our cases by 30 to 40% if we were to aggressively follow this. So I think if we were to do these strategies, especially during the winter months and the festive season, this decline that we're seeing will become sustained, and it will really help us in terms of decreasing mortality in our country.
It all sounds so simple, Doctor, but these simple things, I suppose, we must follow and continue to follow. But thank you so much for your time, Dr. Guleria. Thank you for speaking to the print. And I hope that we will have the opportunity of speaking to you again.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.